So I want to talk a little bit about intermittent fasting and what does that mean. You've seen that I may have in my post I may say IF capital. So that stands for intermittent fasting. So the first time I heard the term intermittent fasting, I thought you must be crazy. Who can intermittent fast for 16, 18, 24 hours? But then the same thing happened when I heard my colleague told me that his brother did an Ironman. So I thought, that's crazy. 2 years later, I did the same thing. So the first time I heard about intermittent fasting was back in early 2017, is when back in April of 2017, I started lowering my carbohydrate consumption and start eating more healthy fat, and adding more healthy fat into my diet. This was around April of 2017. Now, I never was a ketogenic diet, so I really wasn't trying to be keto or ketogenic. And I went as low as maybe 50 grams a carb per day for me. So it was more like a moderate keto, is that what they're calling it? So it was not like a very restrict under 20 grams of carbs. So I still had my vegetables and my fruits, mostly berries. And I did that for a good portion of 2017. I did my Ironman on a low carb, high fat diet, which a lot of athletes are totally against that, because the belief out there is that if you're an athlete and if you have a race coming up, you need to carb up. So that's a totally different story, and we're not here to talk about that. I really want to talk about intermittent fasting. When I started eating low carb, high fat, I started seeing results as far as the weight loss. But then at the same time, I was training a lot because I was training for my Ironman. As soon as I finished my Ironman, back in the winter of last year, I started seeing those weight loss start coming back. And as far as the last year for me was the worst winter, as far as the weight gain. Like, I gained a lot of weight. This year, I was still doing a low carb, high fat, and a low carb, high fat is not really a diet, so you don't do it for a week, 2 weeks, a month, or 2 months. It's a way of eating. So you change the way you look at the food, you change the way you eat. Earlier this year, I was still struggling with losing those pounds and those weight that I gained throughout the winter. Early September, I started thinking that I need to make some changes into the way I see nutrition, I eat, and I do my grocery shopping and whatnot. So one of the big changes I made was I switched from 35% cream that I used to add to my coffee to 18% cream. So it's still high fat. I still manage to have that fat into my diet, but it's not as high as the 35%. But the biggest thing for me was starting intermittent fasting. So I started incorporating intermittent fasting into my daily routine. What does that mean is I finish eating 7:30 at night, 8 o'clock at night. I don't consume anything till the next day, 11:30 or 12 o'clock noon. Well, I shouldn't say I'm not consuming anything, because I still drink my water, I still drink my hydrate. I still have my warm lime juice every morning, so that doesn't break my fast. And I still have a coffee with 1 tablespoon of 18% cream. That still doesn't break my fast. It doesn't have that much calorie, that much carbohydrate, pretty much doesn't have that much into it to break my fast. And then I go throughout the day for 16 hours of intermittent fasting, and I break my fast 11:30, 12 o'clock every day. Now, I'm not a dietitian and I'm not a nutritionist. I'm just speaking from experience. That incorporation of intermittent fasting into my routine made a huge difference. Now, I eat what I like. Again, the way of eating for me is low carb, high fat. I don't consume any grains. I don't consume any bread, pasta, rice, or anything like that. No simple carbohydrate. I still have my fruit. I still have my Shakeology every day that has carbohydrates in it. So those are the things that I get carbohydrates from. I eat a lot of vegetables, and I do eat berries, or sometimes I have a banana, I have a pear, depending on what I feel like that day. And I eat more fat than a lot of people do. I add butter into my meal, I add olive oil, avocado. So those are the things that I consume. I have a lot of nuts that I eat, Brazilian nuts, almonds, I have walnuts, and so on and so forth. Now, there are some nuts that have more carbs in them than others. I try to go with the ones that has a little bit more less carbohydrates in them. So that's the way of eating that I have. Once in a while, sometimes once a week, sometimes every other week, I do 24-hour fasting. So I finish eating at like 6:30 at night, and I go without eating anything till the 6:30 the next day. And that's kind of like challenges me mentally as well as physically. So during that time, I drink my water, I hydrate. I make sure that I consume enough hydrate. If I'm feeling that I need something a little bit more than just the water and coffee and tea, sometimes I have a bone broth. So again, the bone broth technically breaks your fast, but then when you're doing a longer fast, it's okay to have a cup of bone broth, which gives you the nutrition that you need in order to keep going for a longer time of fast. Good resource on how to do intermittent fastings for if you have never done it is a book by Dr. Jason Fong. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's called Complete Guide into Intermittent Fasting. That's a very good source of information. So I read his book, and a lot of things that I do is based on that book. So again, you may need to talk to your doctors, to your physician before you do anything or make any drastic changes into your life. But the intermittent fasting is something that I do, and I enjoy doing it. And the biggest thing that you need to know about hunger is that hunger, it comes in phases. So it comes and it goes. So it doesn't stay with you for like hours, right? And it goes and may come back 2-3 hours later. So a lot of people, when they get hungry, the first thought is, I have to eat something because I'm hungry. My body tells me I'm hungry. A lot of times your body tells you you're hungry just because it's time to eat, because you always ate at that specific time. Let it pass. Try it for once or twice. It will pass. And then you realize, oh, I ignored my hunger. It's been 2-3 hours and I'm not hungry again. So remember that if you ever want to try intermittent fasting, that hunger comes in phases.